Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scott McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
Every class I open, I showed you the quote on my wall that I use before every class, which is, before it's a trend, it's a shift.
Yes.
Before it's a change, it's an opportunity. And before you know it, it's gone.
Hey, everybody, it's Scott. It's Wednesday, and it's the Pitchwerks podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. This week, Max Miller comes in to talk to us about building up a brand new incubator in a part of the country that, honestly, he's got the ability to do some interesting things you probably didn't even think about. Max is a cool guy. You're going to like this show. And frankly, I cannot get over just how there's this powerful feeling like I just don't measure up, and it's just going to have to be okay. Before we jump into the interview with Max, we're going to talk a little bit about the various and sundry ways that you can interact with this fine program. Let's start with the social media accounts. Every one of them is Pitchwerks, Pitchwerks. That's a LinkedIn company page. It's a Facebook. It's a Twitter. It's an Instagram. There's a website. If you throw a .com at the end, it's beautiful. I was there. I just checked it out shortly. Very recently. It was awesome. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Max. Let's get into some of the things that, the smaller town, the more like rural and farmy type of a place might want in an incubator, and why. All right, Max Miller, how you doing?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here in the studio. I kind of feel like you've got this. And this is a compliment, right? You have this total air of accomplishment and establishment and whatnot. And I feel like you are just I don't know, you're slumming with us today. And I appreciate that so much. He smells of fine cigars. He brings fine scotch. I mean, this man is living life. You are launching a business incubator and don't take this the wrong way, I live there. You know this, right? Mm-hmm. In one of the least likely places for there to be something that forward-thinking, right? Washington, PA has a history of being agriculturally minded. There's the Whiskey Rebellion that's sort of like the big historical draw to that area. And they had the presence of mind to bring in a true incubator development effort, which surprised even me, a proud resident of that area. Tell me, just sort of set the stage. How did that unfold? How did that happen?
Sure, and I certainly can't take the credit for this, Scott. I mean, I'm a relative newcomer to Washington.
Yeah.
But this has been in the works for, 7 years.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, you know how it is when you look at communities, there's so many different interest groups. Right. And we've been lucky that they all have sort of converged in the same mindset at the same time.
Yes.
Right. So you've got, the government, obviously philanthropy and corporations and the businesses in the area. There's just been a lot of discussion really over the years that started with a dialogue between Washington Jefferson College, right, and the city.
So you've got Washington and Jefferson, which is a historic, there's just a lot there. What is it? 200 years old? It is a very old institution. It is a place where a lot of, the great, they're known for lawyers more than anything else, at least here in Pittsburgh they are. I'm sure they do other things, but.
And doctors.
Yeah. And it's still a very small school. How many students are there?
1,300.
Yeah. So it's got this sort of small town surrounded by rural, there are literal dairy farms and this rural thing. And what I loved about when you and I first sat down for completely different purposes was you said, we're going to use what's here in our backyard. And Max, right there, I knew you were the right guy. And take that as the compliment it's intended to be.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's this element of meeting people where they're at.
Yes.
I think as we learn more about, the dynamics in Washington, and when I say we, I mean everybody, the people in the college, the Observer Reporter is a huge partner in this, in the city, in the county. Everybody.
The Observer Reporter being the local paper.
The local newspaper, yeah. And once you start to talk with people, you start to hear them say things like, "Oh, I've got people that are interested in retail, revitalizing downtown." Mm-hmm. Right, and this whole Main Street movement is a movement. I mean, there are people who have the mindset of you don't just have to think about high tech in order to deliver growth in a region.
You can't. You literally will watch your efforts contribute to the further, like destruction of that Main Street small town environment.
Absolutely.
Because let's look at who gets rewarded in the traditional venture capital, unicorn, winner take all type of an environment. Mm-hmm. They're looking for monopolies.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like they want an unfair advantage. They want to be the brand name. They want, when you need a car, to say you need an Uber.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help a town like Washington or anything that's like it. And the country has a lot more of those towns than it has the bigger cities.
That's true. And there's people with a lot of talent. As I start to meet some of the people out there, especially in the agrarian side of things, since we were talking about farming, cheeses and organic foods and farms that are, producing flour and all sorts of wonderful things that are artisan in nature, but they are starting to get some scale, with other people, whether it's, through distillers or selling into the major retail channels, other things, but it's all there in Washington.
Yeah.
I've met people over the last, couple of weeks who are, have small shops where they're doing, yarn,
nice.
And other things that are things that you see, you remember how Lawrenceville was.
Yes.
Back in the day. And even Shadyside, when it first moved here, had that sort of artisan element to it.
Yeah. You can still see some angles where you can see the old way it was and that they had to kind of pull themselves up.
Yep.
And then the next thing you know, they're the hottest thing going. East Liberty is going through that transition right now.
Yeah, as well. And so I think we're seeing a lot, this kind of convergence of at least the mindset is coming together in the town and in the county, but also the capital. I always say that capital follows confidence.
Yes, it does.
And I do think that there are some signals now that people are believing, in this vision of what could be, in Washington.
People are already coming to Washington for a whiskey heritage, for an agricultural heritage. And again, you had me right there. I said, all right, cool. How can I help?
Right.
Right. And that I think a lot of people need to hear. Mm-hmm. Is there something in your backyard that isn't a unicorn, it's really going to go IPO?
Right.
The cheese lady's not going IPO, right? Mm-hmm. The yarn person's not going IPO. And I'm really happy for that. I don't necessarily want everything to be a, Clarion Capital investment, where their name becomes verbed in our vernacular.
Right.
But tell me a little bit about you. How did you get here?
Wow. I was a lawyer by trade.
Yeah.
Yeah. And practiced for, 11 years or so. And then got the bug. I was a lawyer at Heinz.
Yeah.
So I was doing deals and, I got to see the world, which was wonderful. But they sent me back to business school and then I switched to the business side then. And that was really when I got the bug.
So you were doing corporate law. Yeah. Tell me what that looked like. Like what aspects of it were you responsible for?
International distribution. So, that's why I got to do a decent amount of travel.
With the HJ Heinz company. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. But I learned so much about different cultures and how to do business in other places. Met some fantastic people, but learned a lot just about how transactions work. Both in terms of fundamentals, but really how you really have to get a deal done. If they say, we're trying to sell this company in 2 months,
right?
You got to figure out how to sell this company in 2 months,
or tell them why it can't be done, and hope that it doesn't somehow, bite you for not being able to produce.
Yeah, but the biggest thing I really got from Heinz, I got to see pretty much every part of the business. In the law department, sort of like finance departments, you tend to see a lot of everything because you have your hands in everything. Yeah, in that function. But because of that, it really helped me quickly understand business dynamics. Even before I went back to business school, going to get the MBA really helped.
Right.
Reshape my thinking, but it also made me want to start my own company.
Did it?
Yes. So it was great, but then I ended up leaving shortly thereafter. But I did learn a lot.
The knock against the big corporate environment has always been a lack of creativity. I see a lot of people who just don't want to have a boss getting involved in entrepreneurship, right? And I'm not saying that that's a terrible recipe. I'm just saying it seems like a weak reason to get in, right? So you were at HJ Heinz, one of the most recognizable worldwide brands that there is. And there was a certain rigor. There was a certain regimented nature to it. You spoke to people a certain way. You behaved a certain way. There was a hierarchical structure that you had to respect, etc. And now all of a sudden you're in the entrepreneurial space and people are wearing hoodies and flip-flops and, they're behaving badly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know what? Let's kick Uber again while we're at it. That whole Travis Kalanick thing where, you find out that he's really not great to work with or for, right? I have to believe that person there made a conscious decision between the regimented, rigorous HJ Heinz, JD plus MBA type of environment. Do me a favor, just kind of tell me what your thought is on that. Are people who flee the corporate environment for entrepreneurship getting what they're looking for?
Well, I mean, if you use the word flee, then that
that's you're right. It's a loaded statement.
Yeah, that sort of infers that they are leaving, and there are some people I think that are fleeing it.
Let's say let me say it in a way that doesn't lead you along, right? If you've got a person who thinks that they will be free by becoming an entrepreneur, what's your experience?
You got to have the right mindset. I mean, it's not for everybody. And that's really, a large part of what will happen at the incubator, and certainly what we tell the students is the mindset is everything. And that you want to hear that it's a bad idea fast.
Yes.
And it's and it could be a bad idea to just be doing it because you don't want to deal with corporate. So I don't really agree. I mean, anybody that I encounter that has that particular bent on their thinking, I steer them away to sort of think about, well, maybe there's some other company you work better at or something. There's an environment. Whereas the people that I've met that have left corporate because they saw some need that they were passionate about,
yes,
that's an entirely different thing.
And that's exactly what I was thinking, right? I think you need to be possessed of something first. And I think you see it too, that a lot of people, again, and this is where we get into conversations about, do you really want to be an entrepreneur, or do you just want to have entrepreneurial attitudes? Right. And there's an argument for an entrepreneurial attitude before you leave as sort of a litmus test, right?
Yeah.
I would like to see the people who are thinking about starting a business just adopt a more entrepreneurial attitude before they leave. And with your help, I'd like to kind of try to define what that means.
Sure.
Right? So problem solving? Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and proactive problem solving.
Proactive, definitely.
So I think that it's, I always, every class I open, I showed you the quote on my wall that I use before every class, which is, before it's a trend, it's a shift.
Yes.
Before it's a change, it's an opportunity. And before you know it, it's gone. All right. And so I think the notion, when you do say being proactive or going after some issue, some people have this ability to detect something shifting before it's actually a mainstream.
Yes.
Right. Or, the simple example would be the person in large corporate that just has a great idea about a process or something. Right. Yeah. And they say, look, if we just did these 3 steps differently, we'd be more efficient, department's better, everybody loves that.
From their perch, they can see it a little bit more clearly than other people.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that perspective, but some people are not predisposed to think outside of the process they're responsible for.
Yes.
Right. And so, and that's fine. I mean, you need some of those people, sitting at their desk doing their stuff.
Absolutely.
But you also need the people that can think short-term and long-term simultaneously. Right.
If you've got the extra cycles to devote to problem solving, you should do it.
You should do it. And some people do it naturally, and some people have to sort of learn the framework first, the system that they're in, before they can start thinking entrepreneurially about doing something different, because you can be so focused on just learning what you're doing, especially in big corporate, and that's what you're being goaled on. Nobody's goaling you on thinking ahead. They're
That's right.
on your task at hand.
Max did not predict the future sufficiently this year.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that mindset about going above and beyond is a characteristic I think of, entrepreneurs that if you're able to do it in a large organization that's bureaucratic, then you definitely would be able to do it in a smaller organization, of 3 people.
And maybe you're satisfied by that. Maybe just acting entrepreneurially and maybe even having a shift within your company could be enough for you, because this is a big jump. You know what I mean? I hate when people make it seem like this is for everybody. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
No, it's definitely not. But I do. It's not, and I think that this filter. It's one of the exciting things about what's happening in Washington County is because you have to create that filter that's reasonable, that you can push people through.
Yes.
So that when they come out the other side, they either know it's not for them, or they know, there's some things that I already have these characteristics, and now by virtue of having gone through the filter, i.e. the incubator or the student in the classes, whatever it is. Once they've gone through it, it changes their lens. Then now they're able to leverage that trait that they have already,
right,
and build that into something.
And someone supported it and nurtured this. Like, yes, you are pointed in the right direction. Exactly. Because the next thing that I want to shift to now. Okay, so we've got this person who's in this corporate environment, and we can talk about this person being fairly safe, right? But that's not the case for everybody in Washington County. And again, it's a fascinating topic, and I don't want to like be that entrepreneurship's going to save the world guy, because I don't know that. Okay. But let's just pretend for a moment, right, that some of the people that we're going to try to get involved in this community, this entrepreneurial community, really don't have a lot of other moves to make, right? And I'm not making a political statement with this. They were told that these cold jobs were going to be coming back, but automation is a thing too, right? Like, there are a lot of different factors. You can't just tell people the future and then just assume that the one vector you are looking at, which is I'm going to, incentivize coal, is going to be enough, because the robots might have just been delivered. Like, nobody's going to send them back to the factory. Someone who is vulnerable, economically vulnerable, it's much harder to make an entrepreneurial decision. Or maybe if they wait long enough, it's the only option left, and then it's not hard. It's the only thing you have. But if you're right there on that bubble and you're looking for a job, right? That's the thing. I don't know. I'd like to enlist your help a little bit in sort of defining who benefits most from getting involved in something like the incubator that you're trying to build, right? Yeah. In that space, in that economically vulnerable space.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole spectrum. So let's start at that one part of the spectrum, which is, if it is the, underserved, economically vulnerable, however you want to characterize it.
I'm thinking of a coal miner right now. That's what I'm thinking of, because there were 40,000 of them, and then there were 40 of them, right? Yeah. It was just this drastic reduction.
Yeah. It's a hard, the reality is that's a really hard transition.
Yeah.
But a place like this, to say they come to a workshop just about starting your own business, that's a first step towards reframing their perspectives on what success means, because their job, because they were in that industry, everybody was on a established trajectory.
Yeah.
To have this position, advance, get a pension, support your family, all those things.
Yeah.
And it's just
baseline assumptions are totally off for what we're talking about.
It was entirely linear.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's completely nonlinear, and it's just a matter of someone has to be told this is the way that things could play out if you place yourself into this river that's flowing a certain way.
Yeah. You know what you're saying? That like I just realized is that you're saying you're exposing my predisposition for action as that's hasty and wrong. You have to educate first before you move to action. And my predisposition for action is based on, I'm thinking this is a dire situation. And it's like, no, we have to do something. Yeah. And it's like, well, what happens when you tell that person to go start a business and they just don't, they don't have a common glossary. They don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You got to get people to some base level of, starting from a place where they're on the same field.
Yeah.
Right. They may not be the best player, but at least, teach them the rules, tell them this is what people do on fields like this.
Or else you're just giving them a different way to fail.
And exactly. And so, but that is definitely one huge cohort where there's an opportunity in Washington. And there's, people that are, have side gigs now that are in some of these jobs that are being decreased over time, and they are already thinking about their side gig,
right?
But they don't really know how to develop it. But then you have the others that you're describing that are just displaced and need a place to be, re-educated.
Absolutely. And I mean, it feels so wrong because re-educated has some other
really horrible meaning, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's I liken it to it's not that we haven't gone through this, these economic changes, it's a lot of the students I talk with about, this is how things were in the 19th century, and obviously 21st century is different, but infrastructure is different, just the way business is done, those kind of things. But I can see in their eyes when they think about, we'll talk about things, transition, what the railroads did, to the economy, just as an example, right? And you talk them through, with the railroads, look at all the halo businesses that came out of that,
right?
And now obviously that's shot, and things are.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, those things are shot. But now the economy is different. And, we have big discussions about, the cloud.
Right.
Right. And, server infrastructure. And what does that mean? What kind of halo business?
I got to push back, though. Okay. Yeah. And I've been accused by some very smart people around Pittsburgh of being something of a skeptic on technology as a, just in general, I suppose, but, specifically in its social impact. Right. Mm-hmm. And I will just say it to you this way. I think you're right that the railroads and other things are good examples of how an economy, how society can bounce back and be even stronger afterwards. But I think that just like any exercise, there's usually a period of rest, right? So you talk about the railroads. We invented the railroads, and then we sat and just basically... Well, railroads are pretty cool, aren't they? Like we spent a long time sort of like proud of this development, right? The automobile comes along. We're very proud of this. And then we all just have a nap. Like, earth-shattering, like job-killing, job-creating. These innovations are now like every day. 2 years ago, cryptocurrency was not a word anyone knew about. Right? The idea of a blockchain is still foreign to so many people, but IBM is using it in their ads, right? There's this weird sort of like every time happening all at the same time. Like there's people who live in Whiskey Town, and there's people who are talking about blockchains for like iPod warranties. And I just don't, I don't know that people have had enough chance to catch their breath. That's really my sort of counter argument is, do they have enough? But let me say it a different way. My concern is that there's no gap between these major sea changes.
That may be, and I think I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think the finer point I was trying to put on that is that the once you do know whatever the new infrastructure is, if you're the person who's displaced, let's say you're that person who's in whatever role you're in. You probably haven't really been thinking about the macro issues of this shift that's happening.
I agree with that.
Right. And so because you're not thinking about it, you can't identify your place in that world.
Right.
But once you're told this is what's happening, that's the only reason I mentioned servers and cloud and that kind of stuff. It's just say to the student or to the person running the business, you have to sort of know the landscape. And then you could say, oh, I could probably fit somewhere in there. I can envision myself.
I'm buttressing that opinion by saying I agree with you because I think that there is a higher degree of fear based on, okay, so now you start looking through like the job ads. You're cruising through Indeed and it says blockchain marketing specialist. You're like, I know what some of that means, right? But I don't know what the whole thing means. You've been working, all this time and someone says, well, I can teach you. Do you believe them? Right. Like I think it'd be very difficult to just put your faith in it. The education step is therefore that much more critical as opposed to just action.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a combination of the two. I mean, there's some people you can educate all you want. They're never going to take the action because it's not in their makeup, their DNA.
Totally.
It's not their personality.
Right.
But there'll be plenty of others that say, oh, wow, I never thought that way. And therefore I'm now empowered Because I think a lot of what we're doing in Washington, a part of it for the people who haven't started the business is empowering them to think about it, right? That if you start empowering people to say, oh, this is a possibility, especially for displaced people or underserved communities, whatever you want to call it,
right.
Empowering them to do that. The other segment on this spectrum is the people with existing businesses that are, either doing fine in Washington or stagnant.
Right.
And if they're doing fine, how do you grow more? And if you're stagnant, why are you stagnant? And there's that element of service, that I think the incubator will bring to life, or at least bring people in to have that conversation with folks, because they're in Washington, but they want to grow. They'd love to hire more people
right.
at their shop.
I think there's also an aspect of not everybody should be the entrepreneur, but we don't know who is going to be successful and who is just going to end up joining one of the ones that is, right? And you kind of have to, I don't mean any disrespect, but you kind of have to buy a lot of lottery tickets here, right? Like the expectation that all of them are going to be, hugely successful businesses, that's not realistic. But I became a better employee after I was an entrepreneur. When I went back to the workforce after I started my first company, I was a much better employee. And I mean, head and shoulders above the people that were not thinking, going back to what we were saying earlier, proactively, trying to solve problems. Taking ownership is something I would throw into that list.
Absolutely.
If you have someone who rejects all accountability and does not consider the company's problems to be their own problems, they're at a disadvantage against me. Yeah. Right? Because I'm sitting there going like, oh, these are the people that put food on my table, and I'm going to treat them as well as I can. So they never get rid of me, and they give me raises, and good things happen. Yeah. You ever think about how kind of weird this show might be to somebody coming in from the outside? It's sales and marketing, and then there's startups. And it's like, what do these things all three have to do with each other? And the answer, in my view, is and always has been that salespeople are more, and marketing people too, are more able to see that unmet need. They're more able to think entrepreneurially because they're forced into situations where they're actually meeting customers and hearing about customer issues, right? That person in the mind that we were talking about, that's not their experience, right? Have you ever looked at sort of like, it takes X education to get a salesperson or, a marketing person into entrepreneurship. So it should take X plus Y to get a coal miner into entrepreneurship. Have you ever looked at that way? I mean, I don't understand the studies and research that you guys do in building an incubator like this. So I apologize if this is a weird off the wall question, but it just seems like one should definitely take more time.
Yes, you would think that. And, empirically, I don't have anything now on that, but I can say qualitatively, we just did a survey, about the incubator and sent it out to, to all the stakeholders. And we had over 300 responses.
Nice.
And a couple interesting insights, other than people wanting co-working space, which is good. That was good.
Absolutely,
to be verified.
Got to pay the bills too, right? And that can help.
For sure. Yeah. But I think the highest ranking need was around connectivity and mentorship.
Okay.
All right.
Connectivity in a human sense.
A human sense.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of, and as we're digging into the data now, a lot of that is from existing businesses trying to figure out how to grow, expand their network, and improve their own capabilities to connect. Because, they're members of the chambers and all these things. So I was sort of surprised to see it. On the one hand, I was surprised. On the other hand, not surprised if you're confined to a geography and you're in Washington County all the time, maybe you don't get exposed to other people, even through chambers and other things.
Right.
But the flip side of that is certainly being a part of the chambers and those, it's critical to sort of knowing the network of people. But just listening at the answers, you'd say, all right, these people clearly feel that there's a need for them to grow their connectivity.
Yeah.
Right. I say that because in terms of your question about, the X plus that it's needed, that's coming from people that are already in the space.
Right.
Right. So if you're out of the space,
yes, this is an excellent way to respond to this. Yes.
You need a whole lot more connectivity. And a part of that's why I say the empowerment part is important, because you have to equip that person, first of all, with a knowledge about the ecosystem, fancy word for just, the playbook.
Yeah.
And, or at least the players.
Yeah.
And you tell them who the players are, then you start to educate them on, well, these are some plays that have been run, with these players.
Right.
And you
notice how none of them have 100%, effectiveness.
Exactly. I mean,
and that's going to have to be okay.
Yeah. And just to be comfortable with that risk. I have a student now who's looking at starting a business. She's from abroad, she's from another country, but she was telling about how her father was risk averse, but supported her entrepreneurial attitude.
Nice.
Which is, a great combo.
Just purely talking to you as a professor, can you tell who's got the bug or who's built for it?
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. I mean,
it's hard without a crystal ball to see how it ends, but I mean, you can kind of feel it. Yeah.
You see signals. Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm not saying that there aren't going to be some students who haven't been identified or haven't noticed who had it.
Right.
Because I'm sure that'll happen. But yeah, there's a few that you just know, at least they are willing to persevere.
Yeah.
That they aren't.
They think about things just slightly differently.
That's right. And they're sort of in tune with what's happening outside of the college.
Right.
And what's happening in whatever, field it is that they're looking at. You do see a lot of different personalities. We intentionally start students off with this introductory course and spend a lot of time on the mindset.
Yeah.
I think the number, as I think about sort of the number one bullet point was sort of, you only have yourself to look at in the mirror every day. And this is to your earlier point about accountability, that if you're thinking about entering this space, you have to be able to take the good and the bad and, pat yourself on the back, but also, kick yourself.
I mean, if I really caused it, I really need to own it, and not on a moral plane, but on the, let's keep this from happening again.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
So you brought me a gift. You brought me this lovely Green Dot Irish whiskey. Mm-hmm. And I'm enjoying it tremendously, by the way. I want to give you one. I want to know who you would like to have help from. Like archetypes and stereotypes and those kinds of things. Who would be helpful for you to hear from that might be able to contribute something down there at the incubator?
Sure.
It's right here in the orbit of Pittsburgh. I'm here to tell you it's not that far away because I make the trip every day, right? Who is on your wish list in broad terms? In broad terms.
SMEs, subject matter experts, people that have some time on their hands, right? And are looking to support what really is building infrastructure right in Washington. So people that are in sales, marketing, strategy, the finance. We have lots of lawyers and things also, offering up their time. But I think on the sales strategy, business modeling, really thinking through those things. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's interested in, spending some time, with the cohorts that are there.
Max, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
mmiller2@washjeff.edu.
It's just that simple.
It's just that simple. Yep.
I really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right, that's the end of the ride. As always, we want to thank our guest, Max Miller. Thank everybody down at the Washington Area Business Incubator in Washington and Jefferson College. Very cool stuff. Hopefully, you're a subject matter expert on something that you can offer just a little bit of time, a little bit of insight, help these folks out. They're getting started and they're doing good work. As for Buzzy and I, we are waiting for you to rate and review this fine program so that other people can find it. That sounds nice. That's generally how people decide what shows they're going to add into their rotations. So it'd be super useful for us if you would. Otherwise, we're just going to get back into the lab. We're going to build another one of these, and we'll catch you then.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com, EITCHWERKS.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, EITCHWERKS.